Hey guys, welcome to Mad Does Stuff. This week I'm using Tarmac One Coat Render to render my planters. It says on the back of the pack, for experienced trade persons only. Well, why sell it in a DIY shop? That's all I can say. If you want to see how I get on with that, stick around. And remember, while this intro is on, drop me a like and subscribe to my channel. So as mentioned, Tarmac One Coat Render is a pre-mixed convenience bag, I guess, of render. You just add water, mix it up, and you've got a one coat render system. Traditionally, I think you'd have a two coat system where you'd mix sand and cement, maybe some additives, and you'd do a scratch coat, leave that to dry, and then put your top coat on. This cuts out all that, and you only need to do one coat. I've never used this before. I'm not a professional renderer. I've done a bit of plastering inside the house, so I'm going to be learning as I go. And if you want to see how I get on, stay tuned obviously, and then right at the end I'll give you some sort of my view of the product and some tips that I learn along the way. So here we are out in the garden, relatively fine day today. Make sure the weather's good, don't want it raining while you're putting this on, or I don't anyway, don't know whether the professionals do. And also make sure there's going to be no frost for the next couple of days as well. I don't know the specifics, but I'm assuming if your water freezes, it expands, maybe cracks your render. So before we get started, let's have a look at the tools. So what we've got is some bags of one coat render. There's some coverage on the back. I think it's like 1.4 meters squared at 10 mil. I got 4 bags, that's how many I think I need. I've also got a bucket trowel to get the cement out of my bucket once I've mixed it. And I've got a trowel and a hawk. The hawk and the trowel you use to put the cement on the walls. I've also got some gloves because cement makes your hands dry. Some tin snips to cut the angle bead. I'm using pink grip, which is a grab adhesive to put the angle beads on. I've got a big bucket to put some to mix it in. Another bucket of water, which I'll be adding to the mix. I've got a couple of floats for later on. One is a plastic float, and the other one's a sponge float. And then I also have some angle beads. So I've got the right angle beads, which is for the corners, and then that's just plastic bead, picked it up from Screwfix. And then I've got some stop bead, which will go at the bottoms, and the idea is that just holds all the cement in at the bottom, again from Screwfix. And then I've got my SDS drill with a mixing paddle attached to it. This is one I bought for plastering, and that is the tools. So with the angle bead, I'm just using some tin snips to cut them to length. I'm applying the angle to all the corners, cutting some 45 degrees on each of the ends so they fit nicely together. Same with the bell stops at the bottom, and I'm also using the pink grip, which is my go-to grab adhesive, to put them on. I actually find this quite tricky. This was the hardest part of my day. I think probably should have used another method, but I got most of them on. You'll see later one of them actually falls off, but it didn't matter because it was on the side that was going to get covered anyway. So when it comes to mixing, I'm adding the water to the bucket first and then the powder. This is the way you do it, or it tells you to do it on the back of the bag when you do plastering. It doesn't tell you on the back of this bag, so I've just chosen that way. Not sure if it's necessary or not. It also says to use between 4 and 5 litres. I found I used closer to 5 litres by the time I got the consistency that I want, and that was like a thick yogurt, or maybe like whipped cream is what you want for that. Quite thick and spreadable. So once I'd mixed up one batch, I started applying it to the walls. You can see here I put a big dollop on the hawk, and then I'm just
taking that onto my trowel and putting that on the wall and just going backwards and forwards, running that from the edges, or each of the edges, just trying to build up the sort of uniform thickness. I've got that bit of wood at the bottom. That was my attempt at keeping the spillage to a minimum. Didn't work. I should have used something better. So consider using something better when you do it. So this is just a view of the other planter. Same thing as with the other one, just applying the render to the area. I think one of the mistakes I made, or not one of the mistakes, one of the choices that I made was not to put render bead on the inside of the planter, because I didn't want the plastic to show, because I'm not rendering the inside because I've already filled it. But what that means is that I couldn't render the top properly, so I made a split-second decision on the day to not really bother about the tops, and later on I'll cover it with some decking, or maybe a bit of like an oak sleeper or something, just to put a capping piece on it. So that's why the tops look a bit shonky. So this is what they looked like once I'd put the one coat render on. You can see in places it's quite rough. There's some trowel marks. Again, I wanted it to stiffen up so that I could float that in, and you'll see later I get quite a good finish on it eventually. But yeah. So timings was an issue for me. Don't know whether it's because of the weather, maybe it was a bit damp, but didn't dry and set up for a good 6-7 hours. So it meant by the time I got round to getting back outside, it was dark. But I'm just using the plastic float to close the sort of grain on the surface, I think you would call it. I'm just using circular motions to try and move some of the high spots into the low spots. You'll notice some of the render falling off is where I'm sort of taking some of those high spots off, I guess. And after I'd done that, I went back over with the sponge float pretty much directly after, just to close the grain up even further. I can recommend that sponge float. It is really good. And yeah, again, working in circular motions to move and get a flat surface. So it's next day. Considering I did this in the dark last night, I'm actually pretty pleased with the way that this has come out. You can see maybe down there I've gone a little bit, rubbed it back to the beading a little bit too much, but overall really happy with the way that came out. If you just have a look at the other one next to it, that one's pretty similar, and then the big one over here, I think that came out fine. I think yeah, overall pretty happy. So I finished for the day. So I thought I'd give you a bit of an overview of the product, and then maybe some top tips, or some tips I've learned today. So would I recommend the product? I think yes. It is a convenience product, but I like the fact that I don't have to worry about the mixes of sand and cement or the additives that I want to add. It's all in there. Just add water and mix it up and you're good to go. So you do pay a bit more for the product, but again, for the job that I'm doing, the planters, it worked really well. Not sure I'd use it for the side of my house. Probably have to take some professional advice on that, but for the planters, works great. So top tips, what did I learn? Tip number 1, make sure your mixing paddle is strong enough. Mine here is pretty twisted. It basically, when I put too much powder in the water that I had, it got really thick and twisted my mixing paddle, which is annoying because I have to buy a new one now when I plaster. Tip number 2,
think about using something other than grab adhesive to put your beads on. In fact, I'd say this should be maybe your last resort. I use this because I did a bit of research on the internet, and what I read was it's quick and easy, which it is. You just squeeze it out and you can do it on the same day. But I think actually in terms of its holding strength, and if you've got a wonky wall, and maybe for those beads at the bottom, the stop beads, doesn't work as well, and if you've got dusty walls or whatever, you don't clean them properly, it doesn't stick right. So yeah, think about using maybe mechanical fixings, or even better, do it the day before, mix up a bit of render and use that to put the beads on, let it dry, rock hard, then you can put your top coat on, not worry about it. Tip number 3, floats. I've got plastic float here, they both need a clean, but plastic float, this was brand new, was a little bit difficult doing the motions with it, took maybe a bit too much off at times, got stuck in. I think maybe if you've used it a few times, worn it down, maybe a bit smoother, probably a bit easier. This one, the sponge float, was phenomenal, really good. Like the way that this moved the cement around, filled in a lot of the gaps, and left a really good finish. You probably use a car float sponge, which is what a lot of people use on the internet, but for a £5, this did the job really well. So tip number 4 is the weather. I had a relatively dry day, but it was pretty damp, and I think that affected my drying times. So in terms of weather, raining, bad, because you don't want it to wash off. Damp, okay, but be prepared for a long wait. And also on the back it says there's a temperature range, don't go too low, and don't let it freeze. So weather, think about that, and think about the weather for the next couple of days as well, to make sure that you're not getting any issues. And the last tip, yeah, time. I was out at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night floating up the planters. Not ideal. I'm not sure what my neighbours thought of me while I was doing it, but make sure you leave enough time. Either get up earlier, do your beading the day before, or well, those are the main 2 options. Anyway, probably other options, but think about your time. Anyway, so we have it, end of another day here on Matt Does Stuff. Today, Tarmac one coat render. I biffed the timings, a few things I learnt along the way, but overall the job got done. Right, because it's the end of the day, I'm obviously going to celebrate with a beer, and today I've got a New Bristol brewery, What Time Is Love, so let's get amongst that. Oh, that's alright. Remember, you stay safe, get some stuff done.